My name is Darren, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today's video will be a continuation of our mini-series on vocal horsepower, one of the 3 types of opera singing among the 9 elements of opera. This will be our 3rd episode. In our earlier videos, the first 2 episodes of this mini-series, I gave a theoretical introduction to the concept of vocal horsepower. For this video, and the rest of this mini-series, I'll be showing you how this concept works in reality. Now, before I tell you what this episode will be about, let me do a quick refresher for what I had said in the previous episodes. Vocal horsepower is a type of opera singing more commonly found in operas from the late 19th century, whose emphasis is on penetrative power and weight. There are 4 kinds of sensations which it can give a listener. These sensations are 1. The impact from the force of the singer's voice, which behaves like a penetrating object. 2. The aftershock it creates, such as a ring it leaves in the listener's ears. 3. The electric current its high notes send through the human body. And 4. The adrenaline its high notes infuse into the bloodstream. Vocal horsepower compels, rouses, and invigorates. As a result, the operas where it abounds continue to be among the most beloved works in the international operatic repertoire, even today, long after their premieres. Today's episode will be the first episode where I'll demonstrate how those earlier statements apply in real life. I'll be starting you on operas headed by dramatic tenors, because the vocal horsepower of a dramatic tenor is the most straightforward example. Today's opera will be one of the operas which require the most vocal horsepower from a dramatic tenor, Otello by Verdi. Never forget the name of this opera's composer, because there's another Otello in today's international operatic repertoire which is very different. All of the roles for a dramatic tenor require a considerable amount of vocal horsepower at least. Verdi's Otello has the reputation of being one of the twin peaks of his repertoire. You can see it as the tenor's Mount Everest. Any tenor who has succeeded in making a name for himself in the dramatic tenor's other roles will certainly strive towards singing the role of Otello by Verdi. Comparably to how there have been top mountaineers who tragically perished on the slopes of Mount Everest, there have been star tenors who came to grief in performing Verdi's Otello on stage. It's not like they died during their attempts. It's just that their reputation suffered a considerable dent after their failures. On the other hand, there has been a succession of dramatic tenors who were able to crown themselves with glory from their triumph in the role of Otello. It's the same as how there are mountaineers who managed to return to tell their tales of conquering Mount Everest. In today's video, I'll be introducing you to one of those victorious tenors, who even today continues to reign as one of the greatest Otellos of all time. This singer is the man with the initials MDM. MDM still commands a certain amount of reverence in some collector circles due to his legendary performances during his prime in the 1950s. The 1950s were an age when operatic titans walked the earth. For him to stand out even among them, you can imagine how great he was. MDM's star now no longer shines as brightly as it once did after receiving relentless attacks from critics. However, if you want to experience the fullest potential of an Italian dramatic tenor's music, you simply cannot bypass this singer. Some of his renditions, at least, will remain the best there ever will be for the foreseeable future. MDM stands for Mario del Monaco. Though his career was in full swing by the early 1950s when we start having live recordings, we are fortunate that most of the roles he played on stage have been passed down to us on record. If that's not amazing enough, it's miraculous we actually have a number of telecasts of his performances in several of the parts which brought him fame. One of those telecasts will be the performance featured in this video, his Otello in Tokyo 1959, recorded on Japanese TV owing to its significance as one of the first operatic performances in Japan after World War II. Our opera begins with a severe thunderstorm. Its protagonist Otello had been out at sea battling the Ottomans. The people of Cyprus are eagerly awaiting the return of Otello, their governor. Not everyone though. Iago, Otello's standard bearer, prays that the storm sinks Otello's ship before it's within sight of the port. His prayers do not come to pass. Otello's ship manages to reach the harbour. We'll shortly be hearing a demonstration of vocal horsepower from Otello when he enters announcing the destruction of the enemy. The sound of that demonstration is robust, vigorous, and virile. The resounding notes go right through the ears. This is one of the classic examples of vocal horsepower. The tenor only has about half a minute to impress the audience with his character being at the height of his glory. His character is a Venetian general returning from his victory over the enemy. He has to have a commanding presence too. Hence, the tenor needs an abundance of vocal horsepower for him to convey this to the audience, especially when he has such a short period to work with. Opera roles for lead tenors, baritones, sopranos, and mezzo-sopranos are categorized according to the amount of vocal horsepower these singers need to have for the most powerful moments in their respective operas. That brief musical number, known as Esultate, requires an enormous amount of vocal horsepower, so the role of Otello is a part for the dramatic tenor, the type of tenor with the most vocal horsepower. In fact, the enormous amount required explains why Otello is regarded as one of the twin peaks of the dramatic tenor's repertoire. A musical number lasting less than a minute certainly isn't enough for the role of Otello to attain his reputation as one of those twin peaks. There are also other musical numbers in the opera which give the dramatic tenor more opportunities to exhibit his huge reserves of vocal horsepower. However, before I can introduce them to you, you need to know the story behind them first. I'll thus be proceeding with the story of Verdi's Otello. Iago seeks to bring Otello down. In order to do that, he has to create or search for an opening. He sees a potential opening in the young captain Cassio. He and his accomplice Roderigo scheme to get Cassio drunk. Iago persuades Cassio to join them in celebrating Otello's triumph. He commences his plot by starting a drinking song or Brindisi to strike up the mood. Inspired by the song, Cassio takes it up and indulges himself in drinking. It takes a masterly villain to topple a towering figure like Otello. From the video alone, anybody would think that Iago is a warm and friendly comrade, the life of the party. We only know better since Iago has already clued us in. Here, Iago reveals his mastery as a villain. He throws everyone off guard with his jovial act. By the time somebody gets wind of his mischief, it will be far too late. At that stage, the damage done would be too late to rectify. We shall see a bit of this shortly. The officer Montano comes to summon him to the defences of Cyprus. He finds Cassio intoxicated. On Iago's instigation, Roderigo picks a fight with Cassio. Montano intervenes. Cassio turns on him instead. A duel breaks out between Montano and Cassio. Otello, the commanding officer, steps in to restore order. He reprimands his subordinates for fighting. Take note of the way Mario del Monaco projects his character Otello's authority when he interferes. During that short musical passage, Del Monaco has to employ his vocal horsepower to impress on the listener his character's power as a commanding officer, as Otello reprimands his subordinates. Unlike the Esultate, which becomes a musical number because it's a standalone section, the musical passage Abasso le spade doesn't have that privilege because it's part of a transitional musical number. This transitional musical number is to advance the drama from the previous musical number, Iago's Brindisi, to the upcoming one. When Otello questions Iago on the reason for the duel, Iago feigns innocence. After questioning Cassio and Montano, Otello learns that Cassio injured Montano during their duel. He rebukes Cassio for injuring Montano. Pay attention to the way he exerts his wrath during his rebuke.
Al cielo già il sangue mi arribolle, e la dolce d'anche non la scappoterà in fuga.
This musical passage might seem trivial for now, but later on, it will be important in retrospect. Otello will be drastically transformed in the later part of the opera. The passage is the only example of Otello being provoked to anger before that transformation. There are two things here we need to bear in mind. One, Otello only loses his temper when it's justified. One of his Verdi officers has been wounded in a situation which is avoidable. 2. Did you catch how Otello's wrath was gradually built up over the 10 seconds of singing or so? It didn't explode outright. We can tell that Otello does have considerable self-restraint. Otello's wrath disappears immediately when he sees that the commotion raised by the duel has awoken Desdemona, his wife. Otello exercises his noble authority to dismiss Cassio from his position. Iago claims his first victim. With calm dignity, Otello gives instructions for order to be restored and everyone to vacate the scene. Notice how his tone here isn't the same as that for the earlier two musical passages. We've come to the end of this transitional musical number. From this number, we know that Otello is a true leader in full control who carries an understated nobility. The number is transitional, so it's not musically important, but it's dramatically important. As I said before, Otello's drastic transformation is the main subject of this opera. To appreciate this transformation, we need to know what Otello is like before the transformation and after. In the old days, Verdi and his predecessors would likely have written an entrance aria to introduce Otello's character to us. An entrance aria might have made it easier for us to familiarize ourselves with those attributes I mentioned. All these would have been expounded on in musical sections of sufficient length and with adequate reprises for us to be aware of them. Verdi and Boito did things differently for Otello by using short musical sections with minimal reprises to portray the characters instead. Using shorter musical sections enabled them to adapt Shakespeare's play Otello to music without too many alterations. Do you recall the chain finale technique in our earlier series on comedy? The technique where composers use short musical sections in their finales to represent the many actions which happen on stage? The short musical sections with minimal reprises, like the ones in the transitional musical number we just heard, apply that principle differently. In that number, each of the three sections we listen to displays a different aspect of Otello. All these sections combine to depict the character musically. As we shall hear in the upcoming musical numbers, there are variations of that principle. Verdi and Boito could also use the short musical sections they designed to portray changes in the way the characters interact among themselves, the things going on in their minds, and or their emotional states. Unlike the old days, where the number and type of musical sections were determined by conventions governing the opera's musical structure, the restrictions were much looser or fewer when Otello was composed. Verdi and Boito were thus able to utilize the music to widen the range of emotions, represent fast-evolving interactions, as well as thought processes of higher complexity. Therefore, Otello, their joint product, packs significantly more drama in a more compact manner. The only downside is that the sections are so short that it's very easy to miss some of the changes. Going forward, Verdi's and Boito's method would be adopted by at least one future Italian opera composer, Puccini, whom we shall encounter later. I shall now present the upcoming musical number, the intensely passionate love duet between Otello and his wife Desdemona. After everyone has vacated the scene, Otello is free to spend the night with his beloved Desdemona. They sing a love duet which opens with soothing music. It generates an atmosphere thickly steeped in ardor. The music imposes inner tranquility. It reflects Otello's emotional state at this point. His first few lyrics are about how his love for Desdemona is like a sanctuary where his heart can heal from the troubles of the world. Listen to how Del Monaco's singing conveys such sentiments by softening his voice in a way that it matches the mood of the background music well. Vocal horsepower doesn't always have to be shrill, loud and forceful. Penetrative power is not all there is to it. There's the weight as well. In that excerpt, Del Monaco may be singing at half or less of his earlier volume, but you can still feel the weight of his voice. When you listen carefully, you can hear that his voice is sitting quite low. It's weighed down just like how the musical atmosphere is heavily loaded with romance. This weight gives the duet a quiet intensity. After Otello, Desdemona sings about her joy of finally being together with Otello. A dramatic tenor's female partner doesn't necessarily have to possess as much vocal horsepower as he does. Her voice just needs to be big enough not to be drowned out by his. Del Monaco's partner here is soprano Gabriella Tucci, who plays Desdemona in this performance. The words "soavi abbracciamenti" and the last line from this excerpt are sung sweetly and softly. The sweetness or purity of tone and the ability to move the heart in a gentle way which Tucci exhibited here are features of lyrical singing associated with lyric singers. Remember the table for the various weight categories of the voices of opera singers? Lyric sopranos have the lightest voices among the singers of their voice category. In opera, a particular role is to be performed by a singer under a specific voice category whose voice has to be of a certain weight. The weight of the singer's voice reflects the character's age. The lighter the singer's voice, the younger their character. To use Verdi's Otello as an example, the lyric soprano role of Desdemona is a young girl, while the dramatic tenor role of Otello is a mature man. Old men in Italian opera from the Romantic period onwards are played by basses. The last line from the excerpt we just heard is sung slightly differently from the rest of it. Tucci sings it somewhat sweeter and softer, like a character is dreaming. This line marks the transition to the next musical section. In this way, this duet is different from the duets in earlier operas, where the transitions are marked by sung conversations propelling their drama forward. In the next musical section, Desdemona and Otello sing about how they fell in love with one another. Desdemona begins by singing about how the stories Otello told her about his past exploits when they first met swept her off her feet. Otello continues from there by reliving them as he recalls those stories. The stories had a compelling and rousing effect on Desdemona when she first heard them. Monaco reproduces that here with his vivid singing. The increasing volume evokes the increasing amount of danger Otello recalls exposing himself to as he scales the walls of the enemy fortress and comes within reach of the enemy's arrows. Monaco finishes on a hysterical note. It makes us feel Otello shaken by his recollection of the dangers he had to undergo before attaining his current position. For him to lose his composure in that instant, those dangers must have been formidable. Desdemona restores the peace in Otello's heart by taking over from him with a dreamy account of Otello's homeland in the African desert. When I listened to that excerpt, I felt that Tucci's voice was transporting me across the sands of the Sahara. Desdemona completes this musical section by singing about how Otello had commenced his journey from his homeland as a slave. It moves Otello to sing about how her empathy won over his heart. Desdemona responds by singing how she saw through his lowly origins to his noble heart. The both of them now affirm their love for one another at what is regarded to be the high point of their love duet. Otello declares that his relationship with Desdemona has made him the happiest he's ever been in his life. Monaco brings the weight of his voice to bear on this declaration, endowing it with a strong sense of conviction. This is another example of him capitalizing on his vocal horsepower. Until now, throughout this duet, there have been 3 moments when Del Monaco exploited his vocal horsepower. The first was at its opening when he used the weight of his voice to ground the duet in its quiet intensity. The second was during his reminiscence of his past exploits, where he used the power of his voice to render it as fascinating to us as how they could captivate Desdemona. The third was just now, when he used the weight of his voice a second time to show the major impact of her love. These examples prove that vocal horsepower does amplify the impact of the love scenes in an opera. Even if in this duet, vocal horsepower is only required of the dramatic tenor, there's still more than enough to make this duet one of the most potent in all of opera. After all, the enormous reserves of vocal horsepower required by the role of Otello allows the dramatic tenor to cover for his soprano partner. Besides, Otello gains dominance at this stage of the duet. Before this, Otello and Desdemona were equal players. Otello is now in such bliss, he will seize the initiative and play the role of the active lover. Nevertheless, he and Desdemona first poetically express their hopes that their mutual romance will never wane. Otello has been long accustomed to misery and loss as a former slave who rose to be a general. When he discovers joy he never dreamed of in the form of Desdemona, he is overwhelmed to the point of collapse. He craves for a kiss with Desdemona. Otello and Desdemona exchange a few kisses. The night has crossed the high water mark. They conclude their love duet with a demonstration of high notes. This is a romantic scene, so they are delivered with tenderness instead of strength. Hear how both Del Monaco and Tucci stretch their high notes to give their duet a brilliant finale. The love duet we've just listened to is one of the most impressive in all of opera. There's much more to this duet than the usual proclamations of love for one another. It doesn't merely tell us about the comfort and delight Otello and Desdemona derive from it. It also tells us about how they first got together and what they have in mind for their future together. This duet literally sums up their entire relationship. Vocal horsepower has contributed a lot to that, but it's not the only factor. Another factor is its design. Verdi and Boito were able to invest this much into the duet because of the short musical sections they used to assemble it. We've already heard quite a number of those sections. Each of the extracts from the duet which we've sampled is a section. Most of them should have its own individual melody, a melody which enhances the meaning of the words or infuses them with a certain emotion. We could hear such rich flashbacks. The comfort and delight which takes hold of Otello and Desdemona when they are together could seem so realistic because of the many different kinds of melodies Verdi used here. The flashbacks, as well as the realism of Otello and Desdemona's emotions, expand the dramatic scope of their duet and also heighten its emotional depth, shaping its magnificence. So far, we've witnessed a riveting entrance where Mario del Monaco shaped his voice into a jackhammer which we could sense drilling through us with an aftershock that lasted a few seconds. We've also witnessed a tremendous love duet. At this point, you may ask why there's still no combat scene. You may also ask why we've yet to listen to high notes that trigger an electric current or soaring adrenaline after so long. That's because this is only the first act. In the next act, which I shall cover in the next video, we'll have the opportunity to witness the combat scene and hear the high notes I promised. Does this honestly have to take this long? Do you remember me talking about Otello's drastic transformation? Otello's drastic transformation is from a respectable general ardently in love with his wife to a haunted shadow of his former self who murders her. Based on the musical examples we've listened to, it's unbelievable that the Otello we know would stoop to such a level, let alone commit that heinous crime. It's just as unbelievable when it turns out that Otello was actually brainwashed into it by Iago of all people. Of course, from Shakespeare's play, we know that Iago was the mastermind of that tragedy. From the musical examples alone, I don't think anyone could have expected that. This is the power of this tragedy. It's already a tragedy for a man to murder his wife, but Verdi magnified this tragedy to the furthest extent by characterizing this man as one of the people least likely to do such a thing. He might have planted the seeds for that tragedy in the form of Otello's background. Nevertheless, Otello's love duet with Desdemona is more likely to give us the impression that their marriage put these to everlasting rest. Verdi raises the stakes even higher by opening his opera with Otello in his prime. The higher Otello is, the more tragic his downfall will be. To add insult to injury, Verdi even entrusts Otello with his very own self-destruct button. Iago may lay the traps and or pull the strings, but Otello as Iago's superior always had the autonomy not to fall for Iago's mischief. I suppose this is why we are constantly reminded of Otello's authority in this act. It makes it all the sadder when a person in Otello's position could permit himself to be manipulated by a subordinate into destroying what is dearest to him. Otello could have avoided this tragedy by taking advantage of his rank to detect Iago's plot. If you're curious to know how Iago was able to succeed in his plot, please do continue with us to the next video. If you had fun watching this video, please help me like it. If you'd like to continue chasing this series, please subscribe to my channel. If you wish to express your views about it or discuss it further, please feel free to leave a comment. Thank you, and stay tuned.